All right, welcome back. Great to have you with us. We're getting some great stuff on YouTube, and you can follow our show streaming YouTube/Chatterbox Sports. A lot of folks dialed in today. Alex says he's enjoying the show and loves having super fans or analysts from other teams. Said it's great content. Well, Alex, thank you, and here you go. We have some more. I asked Matt Lane from the Kansas City Sports Network yesterday if he's bringing his A game, if the Chiefs are bringing their A game. Matt, welcome to the program. Thanks for being with us. And will the Chiefs have their A game, and does Matt Lane have his A game for off the bench?
Oh, I'm definitely bringing my A game. And if I can speak for the Chiefs, which I cannot in whatsoever, but I think they will. I think Andy Reid early in the season is going to have his A game, especially for a divisional rival here coming off the early week.
Matt, walk me through a little bit, because when I looked at the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Bengals saw them twice last year, including the AFC Championship game, it didn't matter whether it was the games against the Bengals. It was against anybody. And I've said this 1,000 times. A couple of times I had a chance to do Chiefs games for Fox through the years in Kansas City. The best athlete I have ever seen in my life running around, and this was in a practice field situation, but his body, the way he moved, everything, Tyreek Hill, right? How in the world, just from an outsider that's not following it, tell all of us, if you would please, Matt, why he is not a Kansas City Chief anymore?
Oh man, that's a tricky one. I think at the end of the day, it boils down to, I think, how much money, specifically guaranteed money, that he was looking for versus what the Chiefs front office, what their cap department wanted or felt comfortable with giving out to a wide receiver. I think if that number was a little bit lower, if there was a little bit more ability to meet in the middle, there's a very good chance he was still a Chief. But I think he was looking for a little bit more money than they felt comfortable giving out, specifically guaranteed. And the Chiefs have been pretty fickle with some of their contracts to guys that are getting a little bit older. Not that Tyreek Hill's old, but he's not young anymore. And the Chiefs are a team that does not frequently pay, especially top dollar, guys that start to near 30 years old, at least under Brett Veach's GM.
Okay, so walk me through. He walks out the door. What was the fan reaction to that?
A lot of people, I think, were upset. I think a lot of people were kind of confused, I think, at first. Not so much at the Chiefs for letting it happen. I think just generally upset that they lost. As you said, for most people, you watch Tyreek Hill run around, and I think people that have been around different sports for a long time just know he moves differently than almost anybody else they've ever seen. You can tell in an instant.
Yep.
So you're upset to lose that talent. However, I think as time went on, I think the way the Chiefs carried themselves, the fact that they showcased that they had some kind of plan, I think eased that tension a little bit. But the initial reaction was definitely just confusion and upset and thinking they're trying to pinch pennies when they don't need to. And so thankfully we've come a little way since then, because it was dark times there for about a month right after.
Talk about what they did to replace him, because I think they've done a really good job. And I'm not surprised, because Kansas City, as an organization, is one of the great organizations in all of professional sports. They did a good job.
The first thing they went out and did is that they said, our wide receiver room isn't good enough anymore, right? We know that. We understand it. So we're going to add some bodies. But they didn't just go chasing the next Tyreek Hill. They didn't go out and just try to sign the next fastest guy, somebody to take that exact same role. It looks like they've pivoted, and they've kind of brought in a couple bigger bodied wide receivers with Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and they're trying to, at least if week one is any indication, play a little bit different style of ball here. They're trying to push the ball over the middle of the field a little bit more, use the size to be a little bit more physical in that wide receiver room. And yeah, they still have McCole Hardman to try to take the top off, but I think they saw that there was a need to transition some of their offensive game plan based on the way teams like the Bengals were able to have success against them last year.
Walk me through where Juju is, because, a lot of Bengals fans saw him when healthy through the years with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think this guy is a great player. When he's healthy, I just think he's tough. He comes to play. He doesn't back down, but he's been seriously hurt. Where is he now from a health standpoint with Kansas City?
That's the trickiest part with him because I'm with you. I think from what we've seen from him in Pittsburgh when healthy, or this brief glimpse we've got of him here in Kansas City, he looked really good. He looked in tune with what Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs were wanting out of him, and it looked really good. The problem is he missed some time during the last part of training camp with the knee injury. He's missed, I believe, a good chunk of 3 different seasons so far in the NFL. So you can't rely on his health moving forward. And I do think if he is a little dinged up as the year goes on, it does make a pretty big impact. So the Chiefs are betting on his health a little bit. And I think that's kind of why he ended up with a contract that I don't think reflects his talent level at all in the offseason, was because there are health concerns about him through multiple different teams.
Oh, we're talking with Matt Lane from the Kansas City Sports Network, kind enough to join us. And defensively, you talked about how, there were times, especially in big moments last year, where that Kansas City defense got exposed. I mean, every defense is going to have those issues, but, they clearly come under an enormous microscope when they happen in moments where you can't allow them to happen. Defensively, overall, what are your thoughts of this Kansas City defense in 2022?
They're going to be faster and more physical. And I think that was part of the issue last year. Was it was a little bit more of a veteran defense, but they were still blowing some coverages. They were still making some mental mistakes that you wouldn't expect guys that have been in this Steve Spagnuolo defensive system for 3 years to make. So if they're going to do that and not be the most athletic bunch, what exactly are you getting out of them? So I think this year the overhaul has been, they're playing a bunch of young guys. They brought in some new bodies, but they're a little bit more athletic there on the defensive end. So if they're going to make these same mental errors, at least they'll make them fast. At least they'll be explosive and be physical in return. So it's only one game so far against an injury-depleted Cardinals team, but I think that athleticism, that physicality showed up there in the first week, and I think that's something they're going to try to lean into as the season goes on, is just being younger and being this kind of athletic defense rather than a defense trying to win purely on their execution.
Patrick Mahomes, some would say, is the best quarterback in the game. I don't know how you could argue that. There are other guys perhaps you could make an argument for, but since Mahomes has come into the league, he has just been beyond description. A guy like him, I've only been around him a couple of times. You see him regularly down there covering the Chiefs. What kind of guy is he? Here in Cincinnati, Burrow, they call him, Joe Cool and all these kinds of things, and, the dress and the sunglasses and all that. But he is a very serious guy, much like I liken Burrow a lot to Tom Brady. I think that, it's just locked in all the time, all football, all quarterback, so on and so forth. Mahomes is a guy you see getting a lot of national pub, doing a lot of national advertisements for different companies, rightfully so. He seems like he'd be a great spokesperson as far as a human being is concerned. What kind of dude is he?
Everything we've seen from him so far at this point it's in the similar way that you're kind of describing a Brady or a Burrow, and it is very businesslike on everything that he does. And now with the way the world's kind of trending, yes, he's getting all these sponsorships and he's getting into Fortnite and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, he goes home and you don't catch glimpses of him out, late night partying with a bunch of other players or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just he's got his family at home. He likes to spend time with them when he has free time. He's constantly working on football stuff in the offseason. I mean, he brings a bunch of receivers down to Texas where he lives in the offseason so they can work out and kind of get in rhythm with one another down there throughout the summer and stuff like that. So he's locked into football. And then beyond that, he seems like a genuinely good person. We don't know athletes personally anymore. And we don't have the right necessarily to do that. But from everything you can see from people that have met him, from the way he carries himself, I do think he's genuinely a good person. I think that makes it really easy for the Chiefs and then teammates to kind of believe in him and offer him a 10-year contract in which they're just kind of like, nope, we know you're going to do the right thing for the next decade, and we know that's going to be okay.
Yeah, Bengals are facing that in the not-too-distant future with Burrow, and no doubt they will do the same thing that Kansas City did with Patrick Mahomes. I don't think there's any question about that. Tonight, the town's got to be jumping, right? Thursday night, huge divisional game. I read on the Athletic website, I think it was, that some people are second week of the season saying this is a game of the year. But it's got to feel like it, I would imagine, in Kansas City, right? This is a big game.
Absolutely. And the Chargers beat the Chiefs last year. They pushed them to the brink in the second game last year. So like this is the game that if you're finally going to see the AFC West page turn, this is like the week that everybody wants to start talking about it happening. And now I do think it's big. And for fans especially, this is a huge game. I would think that with Andy Reid and just his experience, knowing how long he's been around the NFL, he's probably trying to keep his players a little bit more calm, saying, hey, there's a lot of football left after this. Losing this game, I've looked at them last year, losing to the Chargers and the Bills earlier in the season. He's going to have his foot on the right buttons here to say this game, it does not end your season. But I think from a fan perspective and from all of us trying to get back into the NFL season right now, I don't know how you could get a much bigger game going from Monday Night Football with Russell Wilson's return to Seattle, followed directly by the matchup of, two of the three most exciting quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
I read where some comments were made about the turf at Arizona, where the season opener, Kansas City goes in there and just annihilates the Cardinals. Mahomes, I think it was 5 touchdown passes, if I'm not mistaken, in that game. Where is Kansas City on the injury front? Anything to be concerned about for the game tonight?
Yeah, so Harrison Butker, their kicker, is going to miss this game. The grass field, kind of the turf that they laid down, slid out from under him on his very first extra point attempt, and he hurt his ankle pretty bad. So he's going to be out. They've already added a kicker to the practice squad to bring up. First-round draft pick at cornerback, Trent McDuffie, who was playing really well before his injury. He got injured early in the second half. He's been placed on IR right now, so he'll be out. And then the last big injury is Trey Smith, left the game early, starting right guard. He is, at this point, I think, questionable or probable to play. He did practice this week, so he looks like he's going to give it a go. But they did come out of the Arizona with a few injuries, and a couple of those, at least, Andy Reid did credit that he thinks the field played at least some role in it.
That's interesting. But those are big, significant injuries. I mean,
yeah.
When you look at a team, especially their kicker, that guy is a weapon and has won a lot of big games for them since he's come to Kansas City. So, I mean, safe to say in week 2, these are pretty significant.
They are. And that kicker injury, especially because they brought in Matt Amendola, who they've signed to their practice squad. And it's a second-year kicker, and kicker's such a mental position that this could flip on a dime. But you're looking through just even his college stats and going back to just seeing some of his kicks last year with the Jets, he doesn't have the same leg that Harrison Butker has. And that's been a big part of what the Chiefs are able to do is if they need to kick a 55-yarder field goal at the end of the game or at the end of half to get points on the board, they have the utmost trust in Butker to do that. And now you're bringing the guy that doesn't have that same level of success or pedigree to kick those same longer field goals. So it'll be something to monitor. Will this turn Andy Reid a little bit more aggressive on fourth down situations and that area where you'd be kicking long field goal? There could be major impacts based on this one because they really do trust Butker with everything. I don't know if they'll have that same trust in the guy they're just bringing on board right now.
See, that's why you watch off the bench. I mean, that's the kind of information you're a fan, and most of our viewers, I shouldn't say most, I don't know for sure, are in and around Cincinnati. But everybody's going to be watching that game tonight if you're a football fan. All right, if there's one thing, Matt Lane, where as a guy who follows the team and knows both of these teams, is there one thing that you would be keeping an eye on outside of what I thought you just made was a phenomenal point on Andy Reid and what he does now going forward tonight on fourth down perhaps, but is there any area where you say to yourself, okay, if I'm Kansas City, I know I can do this, or if I'm Kansas City, I'm worried about them doing that? What would it be? What would they be?
I think there's two big things, at least from the Chiefs' offensive side, that jumped out to me kind of immediately. Is first, how are you going to handle Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa? Like that's one of the better edge rushing duos in the entire NFL right now, and they had a good amount of success versus the Raiders. I think the Chiefs are a little bit better at offensive tackle than the Raiders are, but I wouldn't say it's their strongest position group. Their interior of their offensive line, I think, is definitely better than the tackles. So that's one area that could kind of come into play, especially if the Chiefs and Mahomes are forced to hold the ball longer than they did versus Arizona. But that kind of parlays into the next point. The Chiefs were really good throwing the ball over the middle of the field versus Arizona. And part of that was maybe the Cardinals' game plan to, for some reason, blitz Mahomes on like 50% of the plays. The Chargers, though, versus the Raiders were kind of weak over the middle of the field. So can the Chiefs find that space passing over the middle of the field before that edge rush duo gets home. I think that's a little bit of the cat and mouse game that could really dictate a lot of how this game's going to go.
It's great stuff, Matt Lane. I asked you if you were bringing your A game, and I got to tell you, you brought your A game, my man. You brought your A game.
Thank you.
You'll be there tonight, right? Stupid question, but you'll be there tonight.
Well, I'm actually from North Carolina, so I couldn't make the trip out.
You got to be kidding me. I didn't know
I couldn't
that.
make the trip. Yeah, no, I live in North Carolina now. I moved out here from Kansas City a couple years ago, so I couldn't quite make it back to this game. I had to pick and choose my big game, so I'm not making it back until the Bills game, the next huge game they play early in the year.
Where are you in North Carolina?
Just outside of Greensboro. So living out here on the East Coast now. That's
a great place. State of North Carolina is an awesome, awesome place. But you're following everything that's Kansas City sports, right?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. With KC Sports Network, we don't even just do Chiefs. We got Royals. We got all the local colleges with the Missouri, K-State, Kansas. We got
all right. And let me ask you a question. While I have you on, okay? Because as a guy, this guy is an awesome guy, okay? Let me just say straight up, as far as just to talk to, there's not a nicer guy in the world than Bill Self. And he is a great basketball coach. But you know, all these different investigations and things that were going on, and I'm sorry to throw you on the spot on this, and maybe you're not totally good in tune with it. But, I mean, you know, the hammer is going to come down to some extent on Sean Miller, who just left Arizona, and now he's back here at Xavier in Cincinnati. Everybody tells me he is going to face some kind of suspension. Now, I know the circumstances were a little bit different, but they're also a little bit similar. Do you think there's anything like that coming down at Kansas sooner or later?
This is hard for me because I grew up a Missouri fan. So I grew up anti-Kansas, anti-Bill Self. So I want to say, yes, please. However, if I have seen anything through the NCAA through the years, whether it's basketball, football, whatever it may be, when teams and specific people can bring in money, and a lot of that comes with success and ratings and stuff like that, things get a little lost sometimes. So if I don't know, it kind of depends on if they think they can make an example that will matter more than what Bill Self is bringing to the game of basketball and, you know, from Kansas at NCAA style level. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not just a little bit of a slap on the wrist given who he is, but the old Missouri fan in me is definitely saying, please go ahead and do it just to see them, you know, work through it for a little bit.
Well, he runs a great – I mean, you don't even have to say it. That's a big league operation, and I'm with you on that. It is very selective. It seems to be very selective about what programs the NCAA goes after, if you will, as opposed to those that they don't. So, Matt Lane, thanks so much, and thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Tom. Anytime. I greatly appreciate it, and you're doing a great job, man.
Man, I appreciate that very much. Matt Lane, kind enough to join us from the Kansas City Sports Network. You know, you wrestle when you do a show like this. I got to be honest, and we're only starting our second week. You know, you don't know sometimes if people care much about a game like tonight, Kansas City and the Chargers. Yeah, if you're a football fan, you love it, but do you really want to have a guest on a show like this from Kansas City, from L.A., whatever it might be? And I'm glad to see, based on a lot of these comments we are getting on YouTube, that a lot of you are really enjoying it and hearing some conversations, and especially the Tyreek Hill conversation. Same thing with Von Miller. Jordan, thank you for pointing that out. And Dustin and so many others. This is great stuff.